Chapter 2, Farewells and Kobe. Time skip, 10 years later on an island in the New World. On a small island in the New World, a pirate ship could be seen docked close to the island. On the shores of the island, a large group of people could be seen standing with their backs towards the sea while looking at a man standing in front of them. This man was the now 17-year-old Monkey D, Luffy. Luffy was now standing at 9'7" and was very well built. He was wearing long black pants with a pair of steel-tipped boots and a crimson-red dress shirt with the top 3 buttons open, revealing a necklace with a lightning bolt pendant. Strapped with a black cloth around his waist was a katana with a black and white diamond pattern handle hanging off the left side of his hip. And to top everything off was the thing he treasures more than his own life resting on his head, the straw hat that Shanks gave to him. Everyone from the red-haired pirates was gathered on the shore today to see Luffy off to start his own adventure. "I want to thank you guys for all you have done for me over the past 10 years, and I am truly grateful for all you have taught me," said Luffy while looking at everyone. "I don't sweat it, Luffy," said Lucky Roo, who was walking over to Luffy carrying 2 large barrels on his shoulder, while somehow able to hold a piece of meat in his hands as well. "Hey Lou, I got a bit of a going-away present here for you," Yasopp said as he pulled out a medium box from his coat and handed it to Luffy. Luffy took it and looked at the nice wrapping around the box before he spoke. "Yasopp, you really didn't have to do this. You guys have done way more for me than anyone ever had," Luffy said. "Nonsense, kid, we're a family and you can never do too much for your family," Yasopp said while patting Luffy on the back. Luffy smiled and opened the box to see a black and red flintlock pistol. Luffy held the gun in his hand and looked in the box to see the holster. He strapped the holster around the waist so the gun would be on his right side. Luffy then took on a puzzled look on his face. He had a gun in a holster, but no ammo. He looked over to Yasopp and spoke. "I don't see any ammo in the box and there is none loaded into the gun. Am I going to have to buy some?" Luffy asked, genuinely confused. He looked around to see everyone else confused just as he was. He then looked at Yasopp to see him with a wide smile on his face. "No, you don't have to buy ammo for this gun." "Never will," he said, adding to the confusion of Luffy and everyone else there. "This is a special gun made especially for you. I always wanted one, but even if I bought one for myself I won't be able to use it. You see, this gun is powered by your devil fruit, and in your case, it will not fire regular bullets but instead it will fire your lightning as bullets," Yasopp said, surprising everyone there and causing Luffy's eyes to widen. "I never knew they made weapons like this," Luffy said as he looked at the gun in his hand. He was brought out of his admiring by Yasopp's voice. "Before you can use it you need it to register your devil fruit. So, channel some of your lightning into the gun," he said. Luffy held out the gun and began channeling his lightning powers into the gun, and soon the entire gun was covered with lighting. He then looked to Yasopp, who nodded to him to stop what he did, only to see the excess lightning get absorbed into the gun. "There, that should do it. Try shooting this," he said as he pulled out an empty sake bottle and tossed it into the air. Luffy held the gun in his right hand, aimed it at the bottle, and pulled the trigger. Out of the gun came a bolt of lighting that moved faster than anyone other than Luffy could see, racing towards the empty bottle in the air. Upon impact, the bolt of lightning didn't just shatter the bottle and continue on its path as everyone expected. It hit the bottle and exploded. Everyone was stunned at what they just witnessed. Luffy, wanting to test something out, he aimed the gun at a nearby tree, compressed his lightning, and then he pulled the trigger. Like before, a bolt of lightning raced out of the gun towards the tree. However, this time it pierced through the tree before doing the same to 5 more trees behind it before it finally exploded, destroying the last tree in the process. "What did you do differently there, Luffy, to make it pierce through all those trees?" asked Shanks. Luffy placed the pistol in the holster and turned towards Shanks before speaking. "I simply compressed the lightning a bit more this time, but I didn't expect it to do that much damage," he said before turning towards Yasopp and continue. "Thanks, Yasopp." "I love it," Luffy said with a huge grin on his face. Yasopp smiled at him and patted him on the back before leaving to go stand with the rest of the crew. While he was walking back, Shanks started walking towards Luffy with a parcel in his hands. He didn't say anything, he just handed it to Luffy and stood there. Luffy looked at it with a smile on his face before he opened the wrapping to see a coat folded inside. He took the coat out to examine it to see that it was a black and gold captain's coat. Luffy then took the coat and placed it on. He wore it the way he saw every other captain of a pirate crew wearing theirs, just resting on his shoulders. Luffy looked at Shanks and spoke. "Thanks, Shanks, I love it. It fits perfect," he said with a smile. Shanks smiled at him and replied. "It's nothing, Anchor. If you are going to be captain of your own crew, might as well look the part," Shanks said with a chuckle. "Again, thank you guys for everything. Without you guys I don't know where I would be, or if I would have learned the things I learned with you guys over the past 10 years. Luffy said as he looked at everyone a bit teary eyes. He then wiped his eyes and took on a more serious look on his face as he looked to the sky and began concentrating. In the sky above, everyone could see a thundercloud starting to form. It then started to increase in size, getting bigger and bigger until everyone realized something. It wasn't getting bigger, it was getting closer to them. Everyone was wondering what in the world was Luffy doing. The cloud finally came down and hovered just about a half of a foot above the ground. It was a dark thundercloud about the size of a small 6-person boat. Luffy then walked over to the 2 barrels he got from Lucky Roo, picked them up and placed them on the cloud. They sank down a few inches before staying in place. Everyone's eyes were wide. "That's your ride!" they all screamed. Luff looked at them and gave them a wide grin. "You betcha," he said with giving them a thumbs up. He then placed the rest of his stuff on the cloud. He then began concentrating on the cloud once more, and from the cloud, a lounge chair began to form. Luffy then climbs onto the cloud and sat on the chair before turning towards the group to speak. "I should re-enter the Grand Line by the end of the month. When I see you guys again, I'll be a famous pirate," said Luffy, smiling. Everyone gave him a warm smile. "I'll be looking out for you, Anchor," said Shanks. "We all will," said Ben. Luffy then waved at them and began speaking. "Bye guys. Thanks for everything again," he said. As he said that, the cloud he was riding on began ascending into the air before it shot forward and began climbing to higher altitude. Everyone just stared at the flying Luffy and waved. "I'm going to miss that kid," said Yasopp. Everyone just nodded their heads in agreement. Luffy, who was laying in his lounge chair made out of clouds, was just relaxing and enjoying the scenery of the world below him. He was traveling at about 65 miles per hour and was about 20,000 feet in the air. At first, it was a bit hard to breathe, but after a couple of minutes, Luffy got used to the thin oxygen that was present that high up. On his journey, Luffy could see various small sky islands with people on them. Some waved at him he waved back, while others were wary of him, so they ran into their homes and hid. Luffy didn't really care. All he did was continue on his journey to the East Blue. It would take him about 1 day to reach the East Blue, or less than a day if he decides he wants to go faster. For now, Luffy is just enjoying the relaxing ride. "So, this is the Holy Land Mariewa," Luffy said as he stopped the cloud and have it hover high over the capital of the world government, where no one will be able to see him. He had been traveling for about 6 hours now and finally reached the Red Line. Seeing as how he can fly with the cloud, he didn't need to go down to Fisherman Island, he could just fly over the Red Line. Luffy couldn't help but admire the city. Even though he didn't like the bastards in the world government, he couldn't deny it was a beautiful city with amazing architecture. "Well, I am not here to admire the sights, I have places to be," Luffy said as he narrowed his eyes forward and concentrated on the lightning in the thundercloud before blasting off a lot faster than which he was moving at first. Luffy now entered paradise, traveling at a speed of 100 miles per hour. He had taken off his straw hat because he didn't want it getting blown away. At this speed, Luffy is estimated to arrive in the East Blue in about 3 hours. Time skip, 3 hours later. Luffy is now in the East Blue after being gone for 10 years. He immediately slowed the cloud down to only about 40 miles per hour and lowered the altitude to just about enough so he could see the world below him quite clearly. "Feels good to be back home. First stop Makino Nichin, then off to find a crew," Luffy said as he began traveling towards Dawn Island. After traveling for about an hour, Luffy finally arrived at a familiar island where he flew his cloud onto the docks before stepping off. As Luffy stepped off, he turned to the cloud and it began to hover higher and higher until it finally disappears into the other clouds present in the sky. Luffy then turned around to see that he had attracted a crowd. The man standing in front of the crowd was someone Luffy remembered quite vividly. He was Mayor Whoop Slap. He has a cleft chin, wears oval glasses, has a mustache and a beard, and held a cane on his hand. Luffy smiled at the man and began walking towards the crowd. "Who are you? Are you a pirate?" asked the mayor while pointing his cane at Luffy. Luffy took on an amused look on his face before he answered. "Yes, I am a pirate," Luffy said, doing very little to hide his amusement. "However, you can relax, Mayor, I mean you no harm. I am just here to see my older sister," Luffy said, confusing everyone there who was wondering who was his sister. Before they could have questioned him, Luffy began walking towards Makino's bar, knowing full well he had a crowd following him. As he reached the bar, he walked inside and sat in the same seat he sat in 10 years ago when Shanks was there. Makino was not by the bar, so he assumed she was in the back. He was a few minutes before she finally came out. When she saw a young man sitting at the counter, she went to him and spoke. "Good afternoon, sir. Is there anything I can help you with?" Makino said. Luffy gave her his famous grin before answering. "Yes, a large tub of meat and some sake, Makino Nichin," Luffy said while grinning. As he said that, he heard gasps from behind him and one from Makino as well as he covered her mouth with her hand and started tearing up before she launched herself over the counter, surprising Luffy and the crowd that followed him. As she launched herself, she screamed at the top of her voice. "Luffy, I!" she screamed as she crashed into Luffy, knocking him off the stool before hugging him and crying into his chest. "Luffy, you came back like you said." "I miss you," she said as she sniffled a bit. She finally got off of him and helped him up before she ran into the back and came back out with a large tub of meat and a bottle of sake. She set it down in front of where he sat at the counter before she went around the counter and sat next to him before speaking. "Tell me, how was your trip with Shanks? Where did you go? What did you see? Tell me everything," Makino said excitedly. Luffy chuckled at her antics and was about to answer, but before he could, the entire crowd that followed him into the bar screamed out. Luffy's back! They screamed as they all pulled out mugs of booze from what appears out of nowhere and began sitting around the bar to hear Luffy's stories. Luffy chuckled and began telling them stories of his time with Shanks. Luffy stayed in Fusha village for 3 days before he decided to set out to find a crew. Currently, Luffy was standing at the same docks where he arrived at with the entire village standing there to see him off. Luffy was currently looking up into the sky calling the thundercloud that had all of his stuff. Soon out of the clouds everyone saw a single thundercloud come out and began descending towards Luffy. The cloud then pulled up beside the dock as if it were a ship docking there and Luffy stepped on it. Luffy then turned towards the group of villagers and spoke. "Bye guys, I will see you guys when I am king of the pirates," Luffy said as he waved with a huge smile on his face as the cloud began to pull away. "Be safe, Luffy. I'll be checking the newspaper every day to see what you've been up to," Makino shouted as Luffy was pulling away. Luffy gave her a thumbs up before dashing away. He kept the cloud just 10 feet above the water and had it sailed at a slow speed of 25 miles per hour. While sailing, a Sea King rose from the water and tried to attack Luffy, but Luffy simply sent a blast of Konkora's haki and knocked the beast out before continuing his way. Luffy now shifted his chair into a throne with lightning sparks occasionally coming off of it, and his face took on a more serious and passive look. Luffy then spoke in a tone that would send chills down his enemy's spine. "Time to turn this world upside down," he said. After traveling for about 10 minutes, Luffy was startled by the sounds of cannon fire coming from the starboard side of the cloud. He looked to see who was shooting at what, and that's when he saw the ugliest pirate ship he had ever seen in his life. The ship was a large pink ship, with 4 sails, one higher than the other 3. Each sail has a pink heart, and the ship herself has 2 hearts on each side. The figurehead is a duck, and the Jolly Roger of a skull is depicted from the side and has a pink heart on it. The ship was currently attacking a civilian vessel. "I wonder if anyone there has a bounty on their heads," Luffy wondered as he turned the cloud and head towards the pirate ship. As the cloud pulled up beside the pink ship, Luffy had it stay hidden just off the side before he stood up and turned his body into lighting before teleporting to the deck of the ship. All the pirates and civilians saw was lightning struck the ship while a loud thunder sounded in the clear blue sky. And now standing in the spot where the lightning had struck is a man with a captain's coat hung on his shoulders and a straw hat on his head. Everything about the man radiated power, his gaze if cold enough to freeze the sun and his aura was strong enough to make seasoned fighters cower in fear. No one said a word, they all just stared at the man in fear. The silence lasted about 2 minutes before what appears to be a fat, ugly woman spoke. "Who are you and why are you on my ship?" she screamed at the man, trying to act bravely in front of her men on the outside while in the inside she was shaking in her boots. "I was simply wondering who is the captain of this hideous vessel," he said as he looked around while using his observation haki to sense around the ship. He sensed the girl in the lower levels robbing these pirates. He couldn't help but chuckle. He was brought out his observing when the fat lady spoke. "Are you the pirate hunter Roronoa Zoro?" she asked, which earned her a raised eyebrow from Luffy before he replied. "No, can't say that I am. Who might you be?" Luffy asked, genuinely curious about who she was and whether or not she had a bounty. "I am the most beautiful woman of all the seas," she said as she placed her iron club on her shoulders before continuing. "The one and only iron club Alvida," she said. When she said that, Luffy couldn't help but burst out laughing. "You, the most beautiful woman of all the seas," Luffy said as he started rolling on the floor laughing. "Sorry, hag. But you ain't nowhere close to being the most beautiful woman of all the seas," Luffy said as he stood up and looked at the woman to see her fuming. But that meant very little to Luffy as he began speaking again. "Do you by chance have a bounty on your head?" Luffy asked. He saw the woman smirk before answering. "Yes, I have a bounty of 5 million belly on my head," she said as Luffy simply sighed. "Damn, was hoping it was a bit more. Anyway, time for business," Luffy said as he sent a wave of Konkora's haki towards the pirates, effectively knocking out all of them except Alvida and surprisingly a short pink-haired boy who only fell to a knee. Luffy turned to the boy and spoke. "You have a strong will to be able to withstand my haki like that, kid," Luffy said with a smile that made the boy smile as well. Alvida turned to the boy and was about to speak, but never got a chance to, because she was hit square on the jaw by Luffy with a fist coated in lightning, effectively knocking her out. Luffy then placed his palm on her back and spoke. "Bind," he said, and then all of a sudden from the palm of his hand 3 rope-like bolts of lightning came out and snaked itself around Alvida, binding her in place. The boy with the pink hair had his eyes popping out of its socket. "How did you do that?" he asked, screamed. Luffy smiled and answered. "I ate a devil fruit, the rumble fruit to be exact. So, now I am a lightning man," Luffy said as he turned his entire right hand into lightning. "By the way, what's your name?" Luffy asked. "Oh, I'm Kobe, sir," Kobe said as Luffy turned his hand back to normal. "Nice to meet you, Kobe. My name is Monkey D. Luffy. And I am going to be king of the pirates." Chapter end. That's another chapter in the books. A new one will be up soon. Please leave a review of what you think.